Huawei, the phone of the future. In 2019, it was one of the biggest phone brands in the global market, second only to Samsung. Sorry, iPhone users. With cutting-edge technology, it was on course to becoming the biggest phone brand in the world. But when the world needed it most, it vanished. But seriously though, what happened to Huawei? Stick to the end to find out. However, for us to understand, we have to go back to the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and now the earth was formless and, oh sorry, not that far, my bad. It all began in 1987 in Shenzhen, China. The name Huawei can be loosely translated to mean splendid China, splendid art, or China is able.
Bombastic side-eye, criminal offensive side-eye.
It was formed by a former Chinese military engineer, Ren Zhengfei, with just $5,000. Ren started out by importing and selling telephone equipment from Hong Kong. Over the years, they invested heavily in the production until they were able to manufacture and sell their own telephone switches. Their first major breakthrough was the C and C08 digital telephone switch in 1993. It proved that Huawei can mass produce parts at a competitive price and ended up selling quite well. Thanks to the success of this device, they were awarded several contracts with newer clients, most notably the Chinese government.
Let's say China.
Huawei started working closely with the Chinese government, and they still do so till this day. They achieved success in the international market in the early 2000s, raising their sales by 500% and entering into contracts with big tech companies such as IBM. In 2004, they released their first mass-marketed globally available phone, the C300. By 2005, they were already making more money abroad than they did in China. The introduction of Android was huge for third-party phone makers like Huawei. They introduced their first Android-powered device in 2009, the U8220. After that went well, they began pumping out Android phones with focus on budget and mid-range markets. They saw their first major success in the US in 2015 with the release of Google Nexus P. It was designed and developed by Google, but it was produced and manufactured by Huawei. It was a huge success, and it helped Huawei get more brand recognition in America. They also partnered with Microsoft to build some computers, whilst their relationship with IBM continued. Despite their efforts, they never really saw a huge success in the US market, mainly because of their ties with the Chinese government.
China.
Globally, however, they continue to flourish in Europe and China, with phones such as the Huawei Mate 9, which sold over 15 million units, the Mate 10 and Mate 20, which sold 17 million units. In the second quarter of 2019, it made 59 million sales worldwide, second only to Samsung. They peaked in 2020 with almost 11% market share worldwide. Huawei almost acted like a branch of the Chinese military as it supplied them with most of their technology. Accusations about the company using their device to spy on other nations began spreading, although to this day there has been no proof of that ever happening. While this was going on, the US and China were engaged in a trade war. In 2019, the company was properly confronted by the US government. In May of that year, the Trump administration added Huawei and several other Chinese organizations to the entity list. This blacklist basically meant that Huawei could do no business with any American company. This meant that their business with Google, Microsoft, and IBM were no more. Though not making sales in the US is where they got most of the components of their devices, and they even made devices with several American companies. Almost overnight, a huge chunk of their revenue just disappeared. Additionally, out of the 70 billion Huawei spent buying components in 2018, some 11 billion went to the US firms such as Qualcomm, Intel, and Microsoft. They tried fighting back by filing a legal motion declaring the move unconstitutional, but it went nowhere. The bill went into effect on April 1st, 2020 at the height of Huawei's success. Over 130 US businesses submitted applications to allow it to work with Huawei, but none of them were ever granted. Even the Biden administration didn't change this either. Huawei's biggest loss from this bill was that they could no longer work with Google. This meant that a lot of things had to change. For one, Android is owned by Google. Hence, Google could no longer sell a licensed version of Android to Huawei. Therefore, they decided the best decision was to build an OS from scratch with no connection to Google or a US company whatsoever. In August of 2019, they unveiled Harmony OS. This was their own custom OS for their phones, which had been made in-house. This offered a new age for Huawei, one completely free of any American company involvement. This was also an era of significantly less profits. As the US ban came into effect in April of 2020, they sold the last of their US-related phones and devices, while their market share began to plummet. They couldn't sell to the US anymore, and all their devices became void of cool features. Globally, their market share quickly fell, and their global dominance followed suit. This continued slowly and steady until they were surpassed by Xiaomi in 2021, and ever since then, they haven't caught up. Huawei has been unable to take back any market share, and their business continues to steadily decline as they lose more and more customers. While this is happening, the US government and FCC continue to pass bills and laws to restrict Huawei. Several other countries like the US banned Huawei completely. This includes Japan, the UK, Australia, and other European countries. Nowadays, just about the only country that buys Huawei phones is China. And remember that before the ban, most of their customers came from outside China. Anywhere else in the globe, they are a fraction of their former presence, if not completely banned. If you live anywhere else in the world aside China and you still actively use a Huawei phone, let me know in the comment section. I'd love to hear about how it is going. Within China though, the Huawei brand continues to push the boundaries of what a phone can be and even selling their first trifold phone this year. But they are still confined to the Chinese markets. Once a juggernaut or competitive price budget and mid-range phones, they are almost completely wiped off the map. Thanks to a ban of one country, almost all the world doesn't want to buy their phones anymore. And that's the story of how Huawei completely went avatar on the whole world. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share with your friends, make sure you subscribe and ring the notification bell to get notified whenever I post a new video. Bye!